5 or 6? Which way do you go? I don't know. Hit the big end. Okay. It doesn't matter, hold it this way. Hold it this way? Yes. In this way. Okay. Bill Robertson turned a hand-carved ducal into a $500 million business. But he was a whole different person before he became famous and was on TV. In 1975, he ran a bar and drank until the nights got fuzzy. A man whose wife hid bruises while she was going to have their son. A man who almost went to jail for attack but didn't because he had family in the small town. How did he go from being a trailer trash to being the most famous hunter in America? What did he really do in those years that his family never talked about? Everything changes when you know the truth. He was born on April 24, 1946, in Vivian, Louisiana, a small town in the woods that felt like it was the only place in the world. His family lived in a simple log cabin that didn't have power, running water, or a bathroom inside. He was the fifth of 7 children. Their well was dug by hand, and the gas for their small stove came from a well across the creek. It felt like time had stopped somewhere in the 1850s and life moved slowly there. What they hunted, fished, or grew kept them alive. Anything the garden had, like deer, mice, pigs, chickens, fish, and more. They might only go to town once a month to get food, and even then, only when they had $5 extra. The cabin was made in the early 1900s. It had only 3 rooms at first, and a small shed was added later. Remember that life was happy, even with all of its flaws. He said that the fact that his parents never whined changed the way he saw the world long before he knew what it meant to be poor. They were very poor, though. In the 1950s, the Robertsons lived off the land and didn't have any modern conveniences. They were only a short drive from Texas and Arkansas. When Phil talked about those times, he remembered how his brothers would fight over food scraps. That sight scarred him for life. Their anger never got worse, though. They taught their kids to work hard and be thankful for what they had. He felt that quiet strength grow inside him as he did. Phil started going hunting almost as soon as he learned how to walk. In order to stay alive, he had to be out in the woods every day by the time he was 5. Due to lack of money, they learned how to use slingshots and set traps. He learned how to read animal tracks the same way some kids learn their letters. He could hit a mouse from 20 yards away. Terry, his brother, liked to chase deer, but Phil was more interested in ducks. He was jokingly told that he would rather hunt than breathe. He got so good at what he did that people called him a duck killer. He was proud of this name because it helped him feed his family. Before he ever thought about life after Louisiana, those long days in the woods made him who he is today. Years later, his cousin Nathan Hale fixed up the log cabin where it all started. Phil came by a lot. The spot was still in the middle of Vivian and Houston. It was old and small, but it held all the memories that made him say he was happy. It made him think of the times when he and his family were afraid that they might run out of food. What that life did to make him strong. When Phil was young, he remembers his brothers fighting over food. This made him want to find a way out. He picked sports because they made him feel free. He turned down aid and the idea of getting help from others. He thought that football would help him get out of poverty, and that idea led him to North Cato High School. Phil became one of the best athletes at North Cato. In the early 1960s, he was named All-State in football, baseball, and track. In Louisiana at the time, this was a very odd mix. His family couldn't afford shoes, so he trained barefoot in the muddy fields for hours by throwing rocks and running sprints. Scouts quickly saw him. Louisiana Tech gave him a full grant in 1965. It seemed like a good idea, and he took it because it paid for everything he needed, like gas and books, which his family would never have been able to buy. Phil's fame grew quickly when he was a quarterback. His arm was strong and brave. Some people thought he got that arm by throwing rocks at birds, which was partly true. He took his high school team to the playoffs more than once. And he started at Louisiana Tech in 1966 and 1967, getting to play before a young Terry Bradshaw. Over the course of 2 years, he completed 179 out of 401 passes, gaining 2,237 yards and 12 scores. Besides that, he threw 34 picks. A sign of his rough and tough style. Those were tough years for Louisiana Tech. They even lost to Alabama 34-0. But even Bear Bryant said good things about Phil's throwing. It was agreed upon that he was talented. However, his love stayed in the woods. Phil also kept recruiting people. He told schools that he would only go if they offered scholarships that covered his books and gas. Without them, he would not have been able to go. He never asked for help. He wanted help that he had earned. As much as his skill on the field, people remembered him for being able to do things on his own. His private life had its own drama. In 1964, when he was a senior, he dated Marcia Caraway, who became known as Miss K. When she got pregnant, everyone in their small town talked about it and judged them. Their families made them get married with a gun. It took place just before he went to college. Their relationship made it through the storm and became an important part of his public story. The most surprising thing about Phil's life was when he quit football for good. He quit the sport in 1967 after starting ahead of Bradshaw and getting the attention of scouts. He cared more about hunting. After that, the Washington Redskins called out and offered to let him join the team and make around $60,000. At the time, that much money could change your whole life. Phil said no, he picked the Ducks instead. People were shocked. They couldn't believe it. Friends on the team said they thought it was the end of a great sports career. Phil never felt bad about what he did. In a strange way, his time as a college quarterback stuck with people. In order to hunt, he skipped practices and sometimes came to the field with duck feathers on his body or squirrel tails in his bags. To get ducks, he even swam across frozen lakes in his shorts. His friends shook their heads, laughed, and said nice things about him at the same time. Phil eventually had to step down as quarterback, and Bradshaw took over. From there, he became an NFL star. Phil went on to get a master's degree in teaching and a bachelor's degree in physical education. He became a teacher, and his students loved him because he made the class fun and full of life. But the confusion of being a teacher made him tired. He called his students violent tramps and thought the school setting didn't fit with who he was. He quit all of a sudden in 1972 and went back to living in the woods. Many people didn't understand his choice, but it helped him get the life he really wanted. Back in 1970, the Washington Redskins gave Phil another chance to play professional football, but he turned it down again. He said the same thing twice. Terry picked the Bucks. I went after the Ducks. He made more than $45 million over the course of his career. Phil decided to be poor, fish, and work in bars. Everyone in his story was surprised by every move that didn't go as planned. After college, Phil Robertson moved to Louisiana and tried to get his life together, but it kept getting away from him. This was the start of his crazy years. As a professional fisherman, he had to haul in nets on hot, long days. At the same time, he was in charge of a smoky bar in 1975 where the nights got too wild. Because he lived in a trailer, people called him trailer trash. He didn't fight the name because he wasn't living in a way that showed them they were wrong. His wife, Kay, tried to hold on to something stable while he drank a lot, used any drugs that came through the door, and went from woman to woman. They broke up more than once because his nights were always bad. He later said that he was breaking life apart by romping and stomping through it, not giving the next thing a thought. Every day, his family felt the stress and ate whatever they could catch or grow. Each year, he kept going in a way that made him more like something bad. Finally, all of that chaos came together to make him face who he had become, because violence kept coming, and this time it got to his own house. He got into a fight at the bar he ran one night in 1975, when he was very drunk again. He yelled at first and then got into a full-on fight where he hit the bar owner and the owner's wife. Anyone else would have gone to jail for the attack, but because he was from a small town and had a lot of close friends, he was not charged. She had bruises on her body and was pregnant at the time. The mental weight of those days stayed with her for decades. He got away with it without getting in trouble with the law, but that night's events stayed with their family. He didn't change right away. That moment put a sad and unavoidable piece in their story. There was a line he crossed before he finally found his way back. It marked the lowest point. He had been with Kay for almost 10 years before they broke up. A long time before he knew how easily things could break. Alan, their first boy, was born on January 5, 1965. In 1966, they got married in a ceremony known as a shotgun wedding. They didn't know how to raise a family of 4 boys on almost nothing because Kay was only 16. Alan came along in 1965, then Jace on August 16, 1969, Willie, and then Jeff. They got by on about $8,000 a year in the 1970s. Built their lives on what the land gave them. Her grandma told her to stay, even when Robertson's wild nights left her alone with the boys and worried to pieces. Kay caught and netted fish to feed everyone. Someone in the house had to keep her hope alive. After many years, a long time after those early storms, another one came from the past. Tests of Robertson's DNA in November 2019 showed that he had a daughter named Phyllis from a short affair in the 1970s. The first people she talked to were his kids. In early 2020, a DNA test proved what she already knew. In February 2020, she was 45 years old when they met for the first time. On May 28, 2020, he told everyone about her on his show, Unashamed. He said he didn't know she existed, and the family accepted her right away. But the news made everyone realize that decisions made decades ago still have effects on the present. The man who used to rush through life without stopping to see what he was doing broke down in the end. By the middle of the 1970s, he was no longer able to avoid the damage. He went to a revival meeting and heard the kind of speech he had always tried to avoid. He said that those early years were like living under the evil one. He said that he did so much bad stuff that he almost lost his wife and his family. He said that he had been drinking and getting high with the worst of them. Until one day, something inside him gave way. He then stopped talking to his old friends, changed his phone number, and lived alone for a year, putting together what was left of himself. That choice changed everything about his life. It went from being chaotic to more stable, and it gave him a basis based on faith instead of noise. He did fail and have trust at the beginning of his story, though. Part of it started in 1972 on Moss Lake, which is on the border between Arkansas and Louisiana. During his hunt, his friend told him to make a noise that ducks would follow. Robertson paid attention to what they said. A Louisiana wood block was used to make his first duck call. It was made right in the blind. He tested it that night and heard a quack that was so good that he knew he had made something special. He took off all of his clothes to get ducks out of the freezing water on his first game with it. He then ran 2 miles back home. He knew that the call worked differently than any store-bought one had before. That moment sparked the idea for Duck Commander, which grew into a big business. By 1972, he had stopped teaching to make duck calls full-time. In his first year, he sold calls worth $8,000. Kay fed the boys buffalo and catfish from the Washita River with that money. In 1972, he got a license for his idea, and in 1973, he started Duck Commander. Their house turned into a little business, where the family put together, packed, and mailed each call by hand. Robertson tried to sell them in every state he went, but he was turned down every time. Stuttgart, Arkansas, is known as the duck hunting capital. People there laughed him out of the biggest sporting goods shop in town and thought his call was a hillbilly toy. More than 100 shops turned him down while he slept in his truck and fished for a living. When hunters tried his call, they all agreed that it was strong. After many years, the store in Stuttgart that made fun of him became one of his most important clients. Just that store helped Duck Commander sell a lot of stuff, worth millions of dollars. The business that grew out of those long, cold trips is now worth over $500 million. There is still irony in the air. In the beginning, the Robertson house was like a factory. While Phil was going from town to town, Kay and the boys worked on calls for a long time. Before the 1980s, they didn't have any regular money, so they ate whatever they could catch or grow. Their success came from not giving up in their faith that a single perfect sound carved out of wood could change their lives. Phil didn't give up, even after being turned down many times. With the Duckman video series in the early 1980s, he changed shooting once more. Loud music, wild hunts, and close-up action on these tapes kept hunters all over the world interested. A lot of people bought his books and he became a cult figure. Even more quickly, Duck Commander spread a way of hunting that became popular all over the country. Over time, his faith and stories became just as important to him as duck calls. After he stopped teaching in 1973, he went on to speak at churches all over the country about how he went from being a mess to being saved. In collaboration with his son Al, he wrote the Duck Commander Faith Bible. In 2013, his book Happy 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 was a big hit in the New York Times. Everyone in the Robertson family changed because of him, and his change helped make the public picture that millions of people know. In 1972, they made one hand-carved duck call. By the early 2000s, it had grown into a multi-million-dollar business. Duck Commander grew into clothing, gear, and entertainment under the direction of Willie Robertson. It now sells in all 50 states and over 100 countries. By 2012, the company was worth more than $500 million, and during Duck Dynasty, merchandise sales hit $400 million. No one in the shooting world had ever seen someone go from being poor to being famous across the country. People across the country paid attention when Duck Dynasty first aired on A&E in March 2012. The show had more than 9 million people per episode by Season 4. In Season 1, it got 1.82 million viewers per episode. Over 12 million people came to special events. People were interested in the jokes, the hair, the prayers, and the chaos. The show's product sales brought in $400 million over 11 seasons, and the Robertsons became well known. More than 1.5 million people watched their last show in 2017. Once Duck Dynasty was over, Phil kept building. Starred in spin-offs, started the Unashamed show with his sons in 2018, and kept telling stories about faith and the outdoors. He was put in the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame in 2020 for his work as an outdoorsman. His influence went beyond TV and into books, talks, and outdoor activities. He also wasn't afraid to talk about politics. He supported Ted Cruz in 2016 and was in a campaign video shot on a duck hunt. Cruz changed his mind and now backs Donald Trump. He backed Roy Moore for the Senate in 2017 and kept making speeches that caused a lot of trouble across the country. People got very angry when he said things about atheists and communists, and every endorsement he gave made both fans and critics shake. The trouble began in December 2013 when Phil Robertson agreed to do a light and easy interview with GQ. However, as soon as he spoke, the tone changed. He talked about gay behavior and said it was like adultery and being mean to animals. As he rewrote 1 Corinthians and said, "would or would not inherit the kingdom of God," the space around those words seemed to get smaller. People responded even more quickly after hearing what he said. GLAAD said that his comments were some of the worst they had ever read in a major newspaper. Before things could calm down, Andy fired him on December 18 because they said his views did not reflect those of the network. The story turned from entertainment news to a topic of discussion across the country. On every side, people fought. In a strange way, it was the moment when Phil's private beliefs and public image collided so loudly that the echo didn't fade. But the suspension didn't calm things down, instead, it started a whole new storm. Conservatives like Sarah Palin and Bobby Jindal accused A&E of attacking Christian beliefs. Supporters started a petition called I Stand With Phil and got more than 260,000 signatures. Duck Dynasty kept pulling in huge crowds. Its fourth season premiere had already reached 11.8 million viewers, making it cable's most watched unscripted show at the time. The ban was lifted by the network in 9 days. They told him they didn't agree with his ideas but that they valued religious freedom. The show played as planned, with no episodes being missed. It showed how numbers, public pressure, and controversy can all work together to make a network change its mind. Phil became more of a culture fighter because of it, even if other people didn't agree with him. Then, in March 2015, he spoke at PAC. He leaned into the mic and told a horrible story about how an atheist family was attacked. Telling people about violent acts that made them feel bad before he linked them to the idea of not judging others morally. The video went crazy. There was more and more talk about free speech, faith, and whether his words were offensive or just showed what he thought. Atheist groups called it a hate fantasy. People became even less interested in him, and the divisions between them felt like they would last. It was the same GQ article that shocked everyone else. During the Jim Crow era, Phil said he never saw black people being picked on. He said they were singing and happy, but he didn't mention the decades of violence and racism that had been going on. A lot of people were critical, citing real cases of murder and unfair treatment. His supporters said he was only reporting what he saw, but what he said didn't change. The reaction grew even more when people remembered things differently from what was written down. He seemed to stir up new things every time he talked to someone. He never said sorry for anything. Instead, he wrote books and made tapes that repeated what he believed. He once said that they love everyone, even gay people, drunk people, and murderers. He also said that they let God handle the rest. That line was a banner of trust for those who agreed with him. People who didn't saw it as him refusing to see how hurtful his words were. He didn't change his position. His fans became stronger and his critics became louder. This made him a man who stood firm even when everyone else did. In May 2020, a DNA test showed Phil something he had never known before, which changed everything again. He had a daughter. She was born after a short fling in the 1970s and her name was Phyllis Thomas. On November 30, 2019, Phyllis found out the truth and told Phil's kids, Jace and Alan. It was proven by a DNA test, and Phil met her on February 21, 2020. A few months later, when he talked about it on his podcast, he sounded cool. He said it was God's will and he didn't feel bad about it. Phyllis was welcomed right away by her family. Podcasts had her on them. She told her story. A lot of people watched the episodes, and her story of going from being shocked to healing was written about in magazines and on social media. There was a change in the tone of the story when she said Phil's first words to her were, "Showing them became a moment of kindness instead of anger." Phil and Kay's 4 kids each had their own part in the family business. Alan taught and talked about faith in a very open way. Jace oversaw production and always had a dry sense of humor to add to the talk. Willie, who was CEO of Duck Commander, made it a multi-million-dollar business and became the brand's public face. Before he moved to Texas, Jep worked behind the cameras fixing shows and changing the way people saw the world. Then there was Uncle C, who had served in the Army and had a lot of interesting stories to tell. Together, they helped build a brand that had an all-time high of 11.8 million watchers and made about $80 million in ads and $400 million in merchandise. Their different personalities came together to make something bigger than any one person. And the family business turned into a tradition as well as a source of fun. Kay Robertson was in charge of it all. She had been married to Phil for 59 years. Their marriage made it through cheating, being poor, and Phil's crazy past. When Kay heard about Phyllis, she didn't think twice about welcoming her. In this act of forgiveness, she showed the same kind of kindness she had shown decades before. When Phil caused problems in their marriage that could have ended it. By 2024, she was being called the real mother of the family. After Phil died in May 2025, she stayed close to her family and lived with her granddaughter. The people who had always been there for her helped her feel better. From being poor to being a TV matriarch, her story became one of strength linked through faith. The grandkids also became adults. A lot of them joined different parts of the family business, like podcasts, production companies, or church work. Their podcast episodes got even more attention after Phyllis joined the family. Fans felt like the band was coming together, getting better, and turning scars into connections. And Sadie Robertson said that the Duck Commander building had become a center for their growing media world. She also said that the name was ready to be changed by new generations. New ways. Even though Phil's family got better, his health started to get worse. He was told in December 2024 that he had early-onset Alzheimer's disease. Doctors found a rare blood disease in the same month that made his blood thicken and raised his risk of having many strokes. Jace said it was faster body problems that had been building up for years without anyone noticing. It was hard to walk, talk, and even eat with that mix on. His weight went down. His memory got worse. People in his family helped him get around and fed him when he got too weak. The condition was fixed on December 6, 2024. Treatment began, even though the prognosis was still bad. He broke a vertebrae while moving something heavy near the end of that year. He was in a lot of pain after treatment, and the accident made everything worse. He was thought to have had several mini strokes because of the blood problem, which would explain why his speech and awareness suddenly went down. By the end of 2024, it was impossible to miss the falls. His family watched him slowly die, and each report made them worry more. The drop was fast by April 2025. Willie said that his dad needed care all the time. He didn't say much. Some days he couldn't recognize people he knew. In May, Corey confirmed that Phil was quickly losing his mind, telling only a few people what was on his mind and depending on them completely. At the same time, Kay's memory got worse. As she got ready to say goodbye, showed small signs of clarity even in those last days. He took one look at Willie and said, "You're my brother." The words made him feel good, even though his memory was getting worse. He told his family not to cry because he was glad about his plans. His last moments were marked by faith and calm acceptance. Phil died on May 25, 2025. He was 79 years old. He was mostly quiet in his last hours, but he was still awake enough to say a few words of peace. On June 7, his family held private funerals on YouTube, where they shared memories of him with Faith, their children, and ducks. Online, his fans and friends got together to talk about how he had affected them. The media talked about his quick fall after being diagnosed and how quickly things changed after December 2024. On June 1, 2020, 1 week after he died, Duck Dynasty came back with a tribute show. Phil wrote a message that told people to turn on their engines and enjoy the show, which Willie read. Phil gave the picture a thumbs up, then Willie laughed, and then there was a black screen with a picture of Phil on it. A lot of people were affected by the news. Over 500,000 people replied to the family's posts that day. There are more tributes. The family put out a radio episode on May 27, 2025, with Phil's last words. In the first week, more than 1 million people watched it. They also said that some of his estate would go to religious groups, like the Duck Commander Foundation and area churches. A video released on May 29 showed a celebration of life with Kay's children and grandkids present for her birthday. The empire he built kept growing even after he died. Willie's net worth grew to about $45 million in 2025, and Duck Commander's business was worth more than $400 million. 12 grandkids were born in 2025, and 2 more were born in December 2026. A picture of C kneeling at Phil's grave went popular in early 2026, getting more than 2 million views and 100,000 shares. The company stayed strong thanks to Willie's leadership, a loyal fan base, and products that still made millions of dollars every year.